Ever notice how the moment you start explaining yourself too hard, it feels like the power shifts, like you're trying to earn permission to be understood? That's because the second you rush to defend yourself, you're no longer speaking from confidence. You're reacting. And reactions are driven by pressure, fear of judgment, and the need to be seen as right. So today, we're talking about why, when you defend yourself, you've already lost, and how to keep your power without raising your voice, proving your point, or convincing anyone to approve of who you are. Defensiveness shows up the moment we feel threatened in how we want to be seen. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's subtle, like explaining ourselves too quickly or adding extra details no one asked for because we want to make sure they understand our intention. But that right there is the signal. We are trying to get someone to approve our reasoning. We're trying to control how they see us. Confidence doesn't do that. Confidence stands still. Confidence says what is true and lets it sit. Defensiveness is fueled by fear that someone might misunderstand us and that misunderstanding feels unsafe. So we rush to fix it. But the truth is, if our self-image is solid, misunderstanding doesn't shake us. When someone questions us or challenges our actions, our brain reacts like it's a threat. It becomes about survival of identity. We think, I need them to know I meant well. I need them to know I wasn't wrong. But needing that is what makes us lose power in conversation. Because the moment someone can make us explain ourselves, they control the direction of the interaction. We're no longer choosing how we respond. We're just reacting. And reactions never come from strength. They come from insecurity. The louder we defend, the more we reveal we are bothered. The more we justify ourselves, the more it looks like we doubt our own decision. Think about the people who impress you in difficult situations. It's not the ones who argue, explain, or scramble to be understood. It's the ones who stay centered. They speak once, clearly, and let silence do the rest. Their calm is not arrogance, it's certainty. They know who they are and what they meant, and that inner certainty is louder than any external explanation. People feel that. People notice when you're not trying to earn their understanding. It changes the entire emotional temperature of the interaction. It makes the other person question why you are so calm while they are trying to pull you into a debate. The real shift starts when you become okay with being misunderstood. Not because you don't care about people, but because you know your intentions. The truth doesn't need defending. It stands on its own. The moment you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, am I speaking to express truth or am I speaking to win approval? If your goal is approval, silence is stronger. If your goal is clarity, one calm statement is enough. Everything after that is emotional effort you don't owe to anyone. The freedom comes from realizing you cannot control someone else's perception. You can only control your presence. Confidence is quiet. It moves slowly. It trusts itself. It doesn't panic when someone disagrees. It doesn't chase after being understood. And when you stop defending yourself, you teach people something about you. You teach them that your worth isn't up for negotiation. You teach them that your sense of self doesn't come from their reaction. And that is where the real strength is. Not in convincing, not in proving, not in arguing, but in knowing who you are so well that you don't feel the need to explain it. You become someone who doesn't just speak confidently, but lives confidently, and that changes everything. When you rush to explain yourself, you're stepping into someone else's frame of the conversation. The frame is the invisible structure of who is leading and who is reacting. When someone questions your actions, your character, or your choices, they are trying to place you in a defensive position. And if you respond by explaining, clarifying, or justifying, you're accepting that position. You're proving that their perspective is the one that matters right now. The more you talk, the more you show you feel the need to fix how they see you. That's not confidence. That's surrender disguised as communication. It looks like effort, but it feels like chasing. People know when they've pulled you into defensive mode. The moment they see you scrambling to clarify, they realize they have power. That's the part most people don't recognize. Defensiveness tells the other person, you have influence over how I feel about myself. Even if that's not what you mean, that's what gets communicated. When you defend, you shift the focus away from the real topic and onto your need to be understood. The conversation stops being about truth and becomes about perception. And the person who controls perception controls the outcome. So if they can make you explain, they control the frame. Look at someone who holds their ground without defending. They speak slowly. They don't rush. They don't stack explanations. They don't raise their voice. They don't fight to be believed. They answer once and let silence do the heavy lifting. That lack of urgency is power. It shows they don't need to pull someone into agreement because agreement is not where they get their confidence. They know their choices. They trust their reasoning. They don't need someone else to validate it. And because they're not chasing approval, they come across stronger, clearer, and more grounded. When you feel misunderstood, the instinct is to explain. But explanation does not equal clarity. Explanation often comes from anxiety. Clarity comes from being settled within yourself. When you try to convince someone, you're not speaking from clarity. You're speaking from fear of the gap between how you see yourself and how they might see you. But here's the truth. That gap is always going to exist. You cannot fully control how someone sees you. The harder you try, the more tangled you become in their frame of perception. And once you're tangled, you're no longer leading the conversation. You're responding to it. Learning to stop defending yourself isn't about being cold or detached. It's about learning to tolerate the discomfort of not being immediately understood. That's emotional maturity. It's the ability to let someone sit with their interpretation without rushing to edit it for them. When you say something once and leave it there, you show that you trust yourself. And when the conversation becomes simple and calm, the other person is left with their own thoughts instead of your explanations. They have to reflect, and reflection is where understanding actually happens, not in debate, not in persuasion, in silence. So the shift is simple. Stop caring about winning the moment. Start caring about protecting your presence. The more comfortable you get with not defending yourself, the more grounded you become in who you are. And grounded people don't chase control. They don't try to manage how they're perceived. They speak once, clearly, and then they let go. That's how you stop giving away power in conversations. That's how you stay centered. That's how you step back into your frame. When you find yourself defending your actions or your ideas, it often signals that you've already allowed someone else's judgment to dominate your thinking. The very act of defense is a subtle admission that you feel threatened, that you are playing on their terms rather than your own. When you shift your energy toward proving your point, you give away power that was originally yours. It's not about arrogance or refusing to explain yourself. It's about understanding that your value doesn't need validation from someone who is already positioned as the critic. When people attack or question, the natural impulse is to respond. But that impulse is exactly what keeps you trapped in a cycle where external opinions dictate your inner peace. The moment you stop defending, you reclaim control over your emotions and your presence. Defense implies that your worth is conditional, that it must be argued and substantiated. This is a trap because real influence and strength exist quietly, without need for explanation. When you defend yourself, you grant attention to criticism, elevating its importance in your mind. Criticism, especially when it comes from someone who does not understand